So I mentioned program mode in my previous video. If you haven't looked at it, click the thumbnail above. P mode stands for program mode, and I explained that it's a glorified auto mode, and that's exactly what it is. It's for those who are beginning to get into photography and want to take that leap out of full automatic. And P mode allows you to do just that at a simple, easy to learn way. What it allows you to do is it allows you to change what's called the ISO and the white balance. The ISO, to start, if you're from the film days, you've probably heard of ISO, it's the film speed. For those of you who weren't from the film days, think of it as when you get the really grainy shots. You can turn it down so you don't get grainy shots, but your camera isn't as sensitive to light. Now the plus side on it having a high ISO is you can shoot in darker locations. When you set it manually yourself, you won't get such grainy shots. You all know what I'm talking about here with your smartphones when you get little purple bits everywhere and it's kind of ugly. When you set it manually, you won't get that. You won't get as much of it. When you get into full manual, you may not get that at all, depending on where you're shooting. So that's what ISO is, and generally you want a lower ISO as you can get. In broad daylight, you might want an ISO of what's called 100. That's when you're in broad daylight, you won't get much grain at all. When you're at nighttime, possibly 1600 or so. To get into the ISO settings on your camera, it's different for every camera. For me, on a Sony Alpha, you just turn the control wheel here on an A7. For many cameras, you press a button and you have a dial at the top. If you're a Canon user or a Nikon user, or even a Sony user. If your camera isn't like this, just look at a YouTube video or read the manual. Next up is white balance. White balance is the ability to control how warm or how cold the image is. So when you're out in broad daylight, you may want it a bit warmer rather than a very cold, anemic looking photo. When you want that nice homey, warmy feeling in a house, you'd want to change that value rather than have it on auto white balance. Auto white balance sometimes works, and it works for me most of the time. However, when I'm using studio lights like this, you want to be able to set it manually. Maybe you've taken a sunset photo with your new camera and the sun doesn't look like the sun. It looks really white and boring. What you want to do is you want to change that value to, say, shady. They're all named in there, so daylight, shady, cloudy, a few to name. You also have other values that are a bit more technical, and we'll get to that in another video. That's what P mode is, so it allows you to change your white balance and your ISO. The third and last thing it allows you to change is the autofocus area. Changing the autofocus area is a big step into getting out of full automatic mode and getting into a more professional feel for your camera. It allows you to pinpoint the focus on someone's eye. Rather than have the camera try and do it automatically for you, you can always just pick a spot and have it go to that spot. The downside of this is you have to sometimes change it, and that's why sometimes when you're out with a professional photographer, he might take a minute to get focus. This isn't manual focus, this is just setting a point, like say my head, and focusing directly on that head, rather than the camera having to study the scene and grab my head. So that's the P mode in your digital SLR or mirrorless camera or compact camera. All cameras have them, and that's the basics of P mode. I'm Todd Boniface, and thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to Todd's Tech Tips for more photography and technology videos.